Hey, how's it going? And today we're going to explore a Fahrenheit to Celsius converter in Unreal Engine. And this is really just an exploration of the Unreal Motion graphics and how the user can put an input and then that can be manipulated and displayed on the screen. So it's a little involved just because it shows how we can manipulate an input and then display it on the screen. And so this started out as a tutorial on how we could create a function in Unreal Engine, but I kind of just went off on a tangent just to get it working in general, and then I'm going to do a second tutorial on what a function is. But this is kind of the first thing, and it just took a little longer. It takes a little longer because I wanted to give you a fully working menu graphics screen. So how this would work is we hit play, and we could be in the game running around, and there's a little message there that says press 1 for converter, and so we press 1, and this is our Fahrenheit to Celsius, and so I type in 32, and then that's in Celsius is 0, and then let's say I type in 100, and it's 37.74, and I actually have a function that would automatically clear this out, but I just didn't put it in for right now. I'll do that for another tutorial. But if we go 0, that's negative 17 Celsius. So, and this doesn't have to be, like if we type in 212 Fahrenheit, which I believe is boiling, that's almost 100 degrees Celsius. So Fahrenheit 0 is 32, no, 32 is freezing in Fahrenheit, so that's 0 Celsius. And then 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But then boiling is 212, and that's 99.9 or 100 Celsius. So there's some tweaking you could do with it, but it's mostly accurate. You know, it's pretty much there. So I'll show you how I did this in just a few minutes. Okay, we're back and we're ready to get started on this. This shouldn't take, well, I shouldn't say that. This might take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. It's a little bit more involved than I thought it would be. I thought it would be really easy to do, and actually I ran into some problems, and so I hope I can share you some headaches. But I think this has, again, like many things, so much practical application because I'm using it for a formula, Fahrenheit to Celsius, but you can imagine you can use this to convert any value into something else. And so anyway, that's how we got started on this. So this is, I'm just going to call it my project 4. We're just in 5.20, and this is pretty standard, so there shouldn't be any changes in future engines. Like, this is pretty basic stuff as far as the interface and goes. So anyway, to get started on this, we're just in the first person template, and we're on the blueprint folder in the first person, and we're just going to create our user interface to start. And there's some little glitchy things that I've found in doing these tutorials and doing this, working with the UMG or Unreal Motion graphics, and I'll point one of those out to you as we get going on here. So one of the problems that I ran into is that we're going to be taking user input, and that's going to be coming in as a text, but we can't use text. We need to convert that to a string, and then we need to convert it to an integer, and I guess we could convert it to a float, but it gets converted to a float later, you'll see. So that's kind of what got me strung up a little bit on this, hung up a little bit on this whole thing. But just for, this is just a super basic interface. We're just going to go canvas panel here, and we can drag that onto the scene. And like I said, I could have skipped a lot of this part. You'll see I could skip some of this part, but I wanted to give you the fully working interface. I didn't want to just give you like part of it, because I could see people saying, well, how am I going to do this, and how am I going to do that, and how do I, you know, so I wanted to give you kind of the full picture of how you could create this interface. But this is just one way of doing it. There's many ways you could set this up. But for this, we just need the canvas panel, and then we just need 4 things. So kind of the star of the show really is this editable text box here. I always get confused on these, but it's this one right here. No, it's not that one. If you hover over it, it tells you what it is. It says allows the user, so we want the text box. So I get confused on that. You just saw me get confused on it. It's very confusing the way they have it set up, but it's this one that we want, the text box. So there's some things on the interface appearance that are kind of messed up. So we're going to have a hard time seeing the text if we try to mess with this. So if we'll click on this, we're just going to make some adjustments here. So on the background, we'll go into the tint here, and we'll just drop the opacity down. Drop it down, fairly low. And then we also want to drop the opacity on. I believe there's a hover function here. Is there a hover? Yeah, background imaged hover. And that's very distracting too. So on the tint on that, we want to drop the opacity on that. So there's a couple things on the interface that are really kind of distracting. And that's two of them. And then we want to make the font pop more. So we just have to find the font here. And it's here somewhere. Nothing's easy to find on here. Let's see. There's position, appearance, image size, background. I thought it was under style. Let's see. Where is it? See, I just, it's crazy how things are set up here. Image. No, it's not image. Text style. Font. Here it is. So here on the color, it's this weird color. And here we just want to make it black. So we'll go 0 and 0. And then we should have a nice setup there. And if you wanted, there's a place where you can enter hint text. But to me, it's pretty obvious what you need to do. But you could say enter text here or something like that. And sometimes you can just barely see that. So that takes care of that. We can compile and save that. And now the rest of it's pretty straightforward. So we just need some text. So, and we can, like I said before, you can put these in horizontal boxes and vertical boxes and make it all nice and neat. But I'm just doing this to speed things up. So here, we're just going to drag this down here. And then we're just going to size the content. And we're just going to say Fahrenheit to Celsius right there, like that. And we could line this up a little bit better. Bring it down a little bit lower. And that needs to be a variable. And this also is a variable by default. And then we're going to get another text here to put a message down here on the bottom. And this is just going to say, press 1 to toggle converter. Converter. And we can size that to content. And you can make this font smaller if you want. It doesn't need to, it just needs to be a little reminder message there on the screen. I like usually like 12. So like I said, I'm trying to create the most realistic kind of menu possible. And then the last one is our display value. And for this, if you wanted to, you can make the font actually bigger. Make it bigger like that, and size the content, and that needs to be a variable, and we'll just call this display. And we don't want the text blocks to appear, so we'll just blank that out. And that basically is our whole display right there. And like I said, you could totally tweak this and, in a million different ways. I'm just kind of throwing this together just to give you the general idea of it. Okay, and that's good enough. So we'll compile and save that, and that finishes our display. Next, we're going to jump over into the graph portion of this, and there's just a couple things we need to do. You'll see once we set all these in the designer view as variables, then we have access to them over here. You'll see them all are editable box. And what did I call that? I don't like stuff being misspelled, so it's actually, I'm going to call it display. Okay, and there we go. Okay, there we go. So all this is going to be driven off of is the editable text box. So when the person presses enter and submits their value, then it's going to trigger everything. So we're going to get the click on this and come down here, and where it says on text committed. So that's when the person enters. And we're going to need two variables here. We need a couple things actually. We're going to need a string variable, and we can just call it string. And this is going to be string. And then it doesn't need to be instance editable. And then we can make another variable, and this one is going to be called value integer, and this is an integer. I'm just making it an integer, and that doesn't need to be instance editable either. And then there are that. So there's one anomaly with this thing, and when you hit enter, when the user enters the text, for some reason this sends out 2 pulses, and I don't know why it does that. So that was the most frustrating thing for me to figure out. And what we're going to do is make it so we just do once. We just want it to send the pulse once. I don't know why it sends it twice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set these two. So we're going to get this and go set string, and we're going to grab this and set value. And I suppose these could be float. This could be a float. I just have it as an integer, but you could experiment with it being a float value if you wanted. And then anyway, we just hook this in here like that, and this in here like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drag our text into our string. And this is kind of a mess up here, so we're just going to drag that out. And then we're going to drag our string into our integer. And that will convert our text into an integer value. And then once we're done with this, we want to send a message. We're going to need to send a message. We want to trigger some logic over in the blueprint first person. So we need to create an event dispatcher. And this is just going to, I just called this value has been entered. And that's all that needs to do, and compile and save that. And then here we'll drag this and we'll go call. So this will send a message. This will to update our chain of logic. And then the last thing we need to do, because we have this do once, we need to drag this here around and set it into reset. So then we won't get our 2 pulses. And the only way that I think anyone would ever know about this little glitch is by having suffered through the and so that's the only way I know, is that I found this out just from experience. Okay, and then believe it or not, we're done with our Unreal graphics thing here. So let's compile, save that. We're done with everything we need to do here. So let's jump over now into the first person blueprint, and this is where we'll finish up everything. This got surprisingly complicated on me just as I was working through the interface. So I had to actually take some notes, but hopefully it won't be too painful. So maybe we got about 12 more minutes to go here. So I'll try to go as fast as I can. So the first thing we're going to do is create a widget. So let's go ahead and do that. We have our widget, and so go create widget, and we've got that. And we're going to set it to our new widget blueprint. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to right click and promote this to a variable, and we'll call this widget. And this is establishing direct blueprint communication between the first person character and the new widget blueprint, so we have access to all the variables and everything else that's inside of the widget blueprint. And this is the quickest, easiest way to do that. A very important step right here. And then the next thing we're going to do is add to our viewport. Add to viewport our widget like that. So if we hit compile and save, if I hit play, you'll see there's all of our thing right there, and there's our input box and all that. And we don't see our display because we didn't put any text in there. And there's a message to our user, but we don't have that logic set up yet. So we're going to keep moving straight along here. Now, this is where, we get into the manipulation of the interface. So we put a message on there, press 1 to toggle. Well, we just saw everything appear, so we don't want everything to appear. So we need to hide our edit text box, our text box, and our title. Did I call it title? Let's see, what did I call it? I should have named this. So I call it text block. I should rename this to title so it's clearer. So let me save that. Okay, and then we'll come over here. We want to hide that. So we want to hide our text box and our title. and our display is kind of already hidden because there's no input in it. So at this moment. So what we're going to do is get our widget here, come over here, get widget, and drag off of here, and we're going to search for editable text box. It's right here, and then we're going to drag off of here and search for our title. Let's see, that's what I called it, right? Get title. Now why don't I see that? Compile save. What did I call it? I called it title, right? Title. Or maybe it's Fahrenheit. No, it should be called title. Why don't I see it? Take it off. Oh, did I not set it as a variable? My mistake. So that's why we need to set it as a variable. Sorry about that. I apologize. Okay, so now we can get it. So get title. Here it is right here. So once we have these two things, then we can set the visibility on it. So we're going to go set visibility. And a lot of this is just kind of set visibility. Should just, maybe I'd have to drag it off of here to do it. Set visibility on the text. This one, on the widget. It has to be under the widget. So you should see target is the widget. That's the one we need. And we can just copy and paste this once we got this all set up. So then if we plug this in here, we're going to plug this in here as well. And we're going to set it to hidden so we don't see it initially. And then we're going to recopy all this stuff here so we don't have to keep redoing this all every 5 minutes, because we're going to redo this a couple times. Okay, so that takes care of our initializing. And now here is really where we kind of really get into the whole process. So I have this set up off of keyboard press to start the logic on this whole thing. So that's what we're going to do. And this is basically initializes our interface and everything. So we're driving this off of a keyboard event, but this could be driven off of a button press. If you wanted to have a button press instead of a keyboard press, we could add that to the menu system. But this way just seemed to make the most sense for right now. So we're going to get a flip-flop node here. And then we just need to kind of, we're going to have to set our user input here. So we're going to go set UI to this one, game and UI. It's kind of, I just say it's the best of both worlds. And we'll go get player controller. And we'll plug this into there, like that. And things start getting a little crowded here in just a minute, but that's and then what we want to do is we're going to set the visibility off and on here. So we've got to do this a couple different ways. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to copy and paste this. We're going to go Control C, and we're going to start kind of running out of some real estate here, but we're going to hit Control V and Control V down here. And then actually, once we initialize the interface, we're going to end up seeing our display. So we want to get our display because we want to hide that, toggle that, that's visibility too. So when they click one, we want all this to become visible. So we'll set this from hidden to visible, and that's the one thing we need to do. And then down here, it's the same thing. We can get our display. We want to hide it again, so we'll go display, and here we want to hide it. So we'll leave it set to hidden. So this is just necessary to control our interface. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to get the player controller again and toggle off and on the mouse cursor. So get player controller, and then we're going to go set show mouse cursor right here, and we want them to be able to see the mouse cursor. So we'll put this in there and we'll put that there, and then we can just hit Control D to duplicate that, turn that off, and then we can set this down here. And actually, well, this actually needs to go into here. And then, so when they press 1, It's going to enable the interface, show the mouse cursor, and then set the visibility for our UMG. Then when they hit 1 again, it's going to toggle all that stuff off. You can double click here to set a reroute node, and then this is going to just go into there like that. So it's a little bit of a pain to set that part of it up, but that's the kind of what you need to do. Now this is really crazy. This is what this whole tutorial started out on, was this part that I'm going to do next. And this is actually going to convert the value that we get from the Unreal Motion graphics. So remember, I can hit compile and save. Remember, we have at the very end of our graph here, we have this. So this is going to send a message, and that's why it has an envelope there. So we're going to send what's called a bind event. So we're going to go ahead and grab this widget so we can access that event dispatcher. And so off of here, we're going to click and drag, and we're going to search for bind. Is it value has been entered right here? And then we plug this into here. And then we have to create what's called a custom event for this to drive this. So off of here we can go add custom event, and basically this will send a message saying, hey, something's happened, and then trigger based on that something that happened. And what the something happened was the person hit enter to input the text. So every time they press enter to input the text, it's going to trigger this chain of logic that we're getting ready to do right now. And this is just based on a simple formula, but the first thing we need to do is get the value that they entered, which is the Fahrenheit value. So what we're going to do is, I believe that's called, it's the integer that they finally did. So that is this value integer. That's what we need to get. And that's all we need, that one value. But this is the value that we're going to be manipulating. So off of the widget, we can go get target. Can I get target value? Let's see. Is it called target value? My gosh. Get value integer. So it's going to be, I should be able to type get value integer, this one right here. So we're getting that value from the integer, and now we just have to manipulate it. You can Google what the formula is for converting Fahrenheit, but basically one thing we're going to need to do is add a variable, just to make life easier for me, is it's 5 divided by 9. So what we're going to do is, I just call this float multiplier, and I'm going to make this a float because it's 5 divided by 9, and then I don't need to make it public, but the value is 0.555. So that's the value we need to multiply by. And so what we're going to do is, the first step in the formula is minus the Fahrenheit by 32. So what we're going to do is go subtract, and it's going to be, we're going to subtract 32 from the formula, and then all we're going to do from here is multiply by our float multiply value, which is the same as 5 divided by 9. So we're just going to get this and drag it over here and pop it in here. And what it's going to do is it's going to convert this integer into a float. That's why I was saying that it converts the integer to a float here. So I don't know. That should be close enough for what we're going to do. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to update our display with this value. So all we have to do is, let me get the widget again, the widget reference here, and we just want to get our display value. So we'll go get display value right here, and then off of here we're going to drag set text right here, and then this is going to be driven off of this custom event. So we just pop that in there. The target is set, and then all we have to do is drag this into here and it'll auto convert for us. So that is it. It ends up looking a lot more complicated than maybe it is, but we'll go ahead and hit compile and save. I'll hit play and see if it works. So here we are in the game, we're running around. Oh, I see I have a converter. I'll press 1. So I click press 1, convert Fahrenheit. Let's put in 32, and that's 0 degrees Celsius. And then if I put in 100, enter, that's 37.44 Celsius. And then boiling water is 212, and that's pretty much 100 Celsius. So there's some slight tweaking you can do here. So 0 degrees Fahrenheit is minus 17 degrees Celsius. So there's probably some tweaking you can do with this formula if you wanted to, but this is basically the basic setup of how you would do it. In the next tutorial, what I want to do is take this formula and convert it to a function. So that'll be the next tutorial. So anyway, I think this went on a little longer than I expected it to, but I hope you found it helpful. And like I said, it can be used for any number of things where you want to get user input, manipulate that value, and then display it as something else. So anyway, take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.